Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Girivaradari Yashodhanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yashodhanandana Rajajana Ranjana Rajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Anachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Girivaradari Yashodhanandana Rajajana Ranjana Rajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Vanachari Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parirajagacharya Stota Stata Shishima Divine Grace Isi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parirajagacharya Stota Stata Shishima Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi.
So Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I am sharing the screen now for the Lilamrita. Can you see it, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So we can start reading.
On the disappearance day of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, Abai keenly felt separation from his spiritual master. He perfectly understood that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's instructions were more important than his physical presence, and that in fact the spiritual master was present within his instructions. In this way, Abai had always been with his spiritual master. Yet on this annual day, Abai could not help feeling loss. He remembered how in 1932 he had been a grihastha, a new disciple. At that time, he had not been free to do as much service as now. Yet it had been in those years that he had been able to see his spiritual master, offer obeisances before him, eat the remnants of his prasad, walk beside him, hear his voice, receive his personal glance. Abai thought of their meeting together. How powerful had been Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's mission. His presses has been running day and night, printing magazines, books, the daily Nadia Prakash. And Europe had been a promising new preaching field. With Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur at the helm, the Gaudiya Math had entered into battle against Maya's forces. And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta had made all his disciples unafraid. Abai had always been eager to serve his spiritual master, to serve within the Gaudiya Math with its headquarters in Calcutta. But exactly how he would serve had never been clear to him until his last letter from Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. Abai looked back on the more than 20 years since his spiritual master's disappearance. The Gaudiya Math had been undone by its leaders, and everyone else had scattered like leaves in a storm. It was an unspeakable loss, and it was an old story. How the big sannyasis had disregarded their spiritual master's instructions and had intrigued, disputed, litigated. Violent party fractions, false leaders claiming to be world acharyas. And which party had been right? No, both had been wrong, all wrong, because the Gaudiya Math had disintegrated. Now there were dozens of little mats and no preaching, no real preaching as before. When he, Simha Guru, had cast fear into the Mayavadis, had led an army of young, powerful preachers to march throughout India and the world. The greatest sufferers of the Gaudiya Math's dissolution were the people, the non-devotees who had little hope of being delivered from the batterings of Maya. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had begun a spiritual revolution, but that revolution had now been overthrown by Maya. The scattered particles of the Gaudiya Math had settled quietly into self-satisfied, insular, almost impotent units, and it was the people in general who suffered. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the 4th canto, chapter 22, entitled Prithu Maharaj's meeting with the Kumaras, text 39. Yat pada pankaja palasa vilasa bhaktya karma shayam gratititam udgratayanti santa tadvanna riktamatayo yatayo piruddha shoto ganastamaranam bhajavasudevam. Yat pada pankaja palasa vilasa bhaktya karma shayam gratititam udgratayanti santa tadvanna riktamatayo yatayo piruddha shoto ganastamaranam bhajavasudevam. Word for word. Yat, whose, pada, feet, pankaja, lotus, palasha, petals or toes, vilasa, enjoyment, bhaktya, by devotional service, karma, fruitive activities, ashayam, desire, gratitam, hard knot, udgratayanti, root out, santa, devotees, tat, that, vat, like, na, never, Riktamataya, persons devoid of devotional service. Rataya, ever increasingly trying. Api, even though. Ruddha, stopped. Shrotagana, the waves of sense enjoyment. Tam, unto him. Aranam, worthy to take shelter. Bhaja, engaged in devotional service. Vasudevam, unto Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. Translation. The devotees who are always engaged in the service of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord can very easily overcome hard-knotted desires for fruitive activities. Because this is very difficult, the non-devotees, the Gyanis and yogis, although trying to stop the waves of sense gratification, cannot do so. Therefore, you are advised to engage in the devotional service of Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. Purport. There are 3 kinds of transcendentalists trying to overcome the influence of the modes of material nature: the Gyanis, yogis, and bhaktas. All of them attempt to overcome the influence of the senses, which is compared to the incessant waves of a river. The waves of a river flow incessantly, and it is very difficult to stop them. Similarly, the waves of desire for material enjoyment are so strong that they cannot be stopped by any process other than bhakti yoga. The bhaktas, by their transcendental devotional service unto the lotus feet of the Lord, become so overwhelmed with transcendental bliss that automatically their desires for material enjoyment stop. The Gyanis and yogis, who are not attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, simply struggle against the waves of desire. They are described in this verse as rikta mataya, which means devoid of devotional service. In other words, the Gyanis and yogis, although trying to be free from the desires of material activities, actually become more and more entangled in false philosophical speculations or strenuous attempts to stop the activities of the senses. As stated previously, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayatya Shuvairagyam Gyanam Chayadahaitukam. Here also the same point is stressed. Bhaja Vasudevam indicates that one who is engaged in the loving service of Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, can very easily stop the waves of desire. As long as one continues to try to artificially stop the waves of desires, he will certainly be defeated. That is indicated in this verse. Desires for fruitive activities are strongly rooted, but the trees of desire can be uprooted completely by devotional service, because devotional service employs superior desire. One can give up inferior desires when engaged in superior desires. To try to stop desires is impossible. One has to desire the supreme in order not to be entangled in inferior desires. Gyanis maintain a desire to be one with the supreme, but such desire is also considered to be kama, lust. Similarly, the yogis desire mystic power, and that is also kama. When the bhaktas, not being desirous of any sort of material enjoyment, become purified, there's no artificial attempt to stop desire. Desire becomes a source of spiritual enjoyment under the protection of the toes of the lotus feet of the Lord. It is stated herein by the Kumaras that the lotus feet of Lord Krishna are the ultimate reservoir of all pleasure. One should therefore take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord instead of trying unsuccessfully to stop desires for material enjoyment. As long as one is unable to stop the desires for material enjoyment, there's no possibility of becoming liberated from the entanglement of material existence. It may be argued that the waves of a river are incessantly flowing and that they cannot be stopped. but the waves of a river flow toward the sea. When the tide comes over the river, it overwhelms the flowing of the river, and the river itself becomes overflooded. The waves from the sea become more prominent than the waves from the river. Similarly, a devotee with intelligence plans so many things for the service of the Lord in Krishna consciousness that stagnant material desires become overflooded by the desire to serve the Lord. As confirmed by Yamuna Acharya, since he has been engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, there is always a current of newer and newer desires flowing to serve the Lord. So much so that the stagnant desire of sex life becomes very insignificant. Yamuna Acharya even says that he spits on such desires. Bhagavad Gita also confirms, Param Drishtva Nivartate. The conclusion is that by developing a loving desire for the service of the lotus feet of the Lord, we subdue all material desires for sense gratification. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Amagyanatimirandasya gananjana shalakaya. Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya. Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavranda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, thank you again for having me here. This is a famous verse. We can find Prabhupada quotes this in a few places. It's found in the Bhagavad Gita as well. The conclusion is that material desires can only be stopped through devotional service. The material world is all about sense gratification, desire for one's own pleasure. And so a transcendentalist begins by understanding the necessity to getting free from these material desires, the influence of the senses. And so there are different kinds of transcendentalists. There are the Gyanis and the Yogis, and they try very hard to become free, but they're often unsuccessful. The Bhagavatam famously says, Yenye Ravindraksha Vimuktamaninas Vayastabhava Davashuddha Buddhaya Aruya Kritrena Param Padam Pata Patantedo Nidrita Yusmad Angraya. My dear Lord, although non-devotees who take to the path of severe austerities and penances may think themselves liberated, they are of impure intelligence. They fall down from their position of imagined superiority due to neglecting your lotus feet. And so there are many examples of yogis who fall down. We hear in the Bhagavatam, Durvasa Muni, who was very powerful, yet he was always becoming angry. The famous example Prabhupada also always gives is Vashishta Muni. He was meditating for 60,000 years, but he fell down just by hearing the ankle bells of an Apsara, Menaka. And so if one actually wants to become free from material desire, the influence of the senses, then the recommendation given in this verse is Bhajavasudevam. Yes, Bhajavasudevam, serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the devotees, being the supreme transcendentalists, they're able to get free from all these material desires very easily because they employ a superior force. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita famously, Daivi Esha Gunamayi Mama Maya Durateya. This material energy is very difficult to overcome. Sorry, we're just going to close this curtain because the sun is in my eye. This material energy is very difficult to overcome, but one who surrenders unto me can very easily cross beyond it. And so the superior force is Krishna himself. By our own tiny abilities, it's very difficult. The Bhagavatam, rather, also explains Hridyantasto hiya badrani. All the impurities within the heart, they're purified by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself for one who is a truthful devotee. Later on, the second canto also describes Yenye chapapaya davashraya shraya shudyanti tasmai prabhavishnave namaha. The Supreme Lord is Prabhavishne. He is the supreme power, and therefore anyone who takes shelter of his devotees can become purified, no matter which category they fall in. Kirata, Hunindra, Pulinda, Pulkasha, Abira, Shumba, Yavana, Kashadaya, all these different personalities within the globe, and even others, even more addicted to sinful activity, they can all become purified by taking shelter of the devotee. Why? Because the devotee has taken shelter of the Lord, and the Lord is the supreme power. And so one time Prabhupada, he gave a class, or maybe he was in a room conversation, and a devotee asked him, Prabhupada, how can I get free from material desire? And Prabhupada replied, impossible. So then the devotee again asked, Prabhupada, how can I get free from material desire? Prabhupada again said, impossible. The third time a devotee asked, Prabhupada, how can I get free from material desire? Prabhupada replied, Govinda Icha, which means if Krishna so desires, you can become free from material desire. So actually the whole process is to act in such a way that Krishna will be inclined towards us, and then he does the work. It's by his power, not by our own. There's also in His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj's book about his life before he met Prabhupada. He was traveling in different places, and he was living with a saintly person in a cave. And so there was a tiger that was in the vicinity, and the saintly person heard about it. So when it came time to go to bed, this saint, he took a little stick and kept it by his side. And so Radhanath Maharaj, he asked him, this little stick, what are you going to do with it? And he said, well, there's a tiger around. And Radhanath Maharaj said, the stick is not going to do anything if the tiger shows up here. So the saint replied, yes, I know, but I just have to show Krishna that I'm doing my part. So we show Krishna that we are doing our part, and he does the rest. And our part is, you can say, not so difficult. The whole process of Krishna consciousness employs a superior taste, param drishtva nivartate. And so it is susukam kartum avyayam, joyfully performed. As Prabhupada would often remark to his early disciples when they were having trouble, he would say, what is the difficulty? The process is so simple. Chant, dance, take prasad. What difficulty is there? So we have a superior process, and by that influence of that higher taste, the devotee can very easily overcome material desires. The Gyanis, the yogis, they suppress the senses, but they don't have a superior taste. And so Mahaprabhu, his whole mission was giving that higher taste. From the time he ended his scholastic pastimes, which were quite extensive, he wrapped up his books, he put them aside, he began to perform kirtan in the house of Srivas Angam. And so from the very beginning, he was chanting, dancing, but in the beginning, nobody was able to enter the house of Srivas. Everyone wanted in. There was many who even committed offenses because they were not allowed. Gopal Chapal, he tried to frame Srivas Thakur. There was another Brahmana who cursed Mahaprabhu that you'll never have material enjoyment. There was also a brahmachari, he was trying to get in. He was famous for only drinking milk. And Srivas thought, okay, we'll let him in. He's quite austere. He must be quite saintly. Still, Mahaprabhu was not very happy. So the residents of Navadvip, they were not allowed. Mahaprabhu didn't want the atheists to come in, but many residents of Navadvip, they were very pious. So they had a lot of love for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So they blamed the atheists. They were saying, because of them, the rest of us are not allowed in the house of Srivasa. We're not able to see the chanting and dancing of the Lord. So they were not envious. They still had love for Mahaprabhu. And so every morning, although they were not allowed, every morning after the full nights of Kirtan, they will show up. They'll present different gifts to the Lord. Garlands, ghee, yogurt, butter, fruits. And every morning they'll get the blessings of the Lord. So Mahaprabhu, he told them, you can just do Kirtan in your own house. I know you're very eager to come in here, but it's not necessary. You can apply the same process, this joyful process of chanting, in your own home. And so he taught them, 5 or 10 of you, you come together with kartals and mridangas, you chant this Maha Mantra, you chant Hari Haraya Nama Krishna, Yadavaya Namaha. And so the residents were very happy. They took Mahaprabhu's instruction. They began this chanting, and they immediately began to experience ecstatic bliss, love of God. And so this was the beginning of Mahaprabhu sharing this process, this joyful process with everyone. But soon after, when everyone in Navadvip was performing kirtan like this, the Qazi came walking by. And so the Qazi, he heard kirtan, uproarious kirtan in everyone's house, indoors. And as soon as he saw and heard this, he remembered his own religious scriptures. And he became angry. He kicked in the doors. He beat anyone and everyone he saw. He broke the mridangas. And he told them, it's nighttime currently, so I'll let you go. But if I see that you're doing this again, there's going to be very severe punishment. So in this way, the Qazi stopped all kirtan in Navadvip, and the ecstasy stopped as well. So the residents of Navadvip, they were very morose. They approached Mahaprabhu. They said, we cannot apply this joyful process anymore. Mahaprabhu said, why is that? They told him, the Qazi, we're afraid of him. We're afraid he's going to punish us. And we're even more afraid that if this continues, we're going to have to leave Navadvip altogether. So Mahaprabhu said, do not worry. Yamaraj is my servant. The universe belongs to me. Death is my servant. Time is my servant. What need is there to fear when I am around? So I said, I'll show the Qazi. So I said, today, we'll all do kirtan in the streets of Navadvip. Everyone, you go take your lunch and then you come back, you light as many torches as you can find, you bring everyone, and we will go and burn the Qazi's house down. So this incident was the beginning of all the residents of Navadvip getting the good fortune to see Mahaprabhu's dancing, because prior, nobody was allowed in the house of Srivas Thakur. So actually, the Qazi's punishment was, you can say, a blessing in disguise. So everyone showed up with their torches. Everyone was very enthusiastic. It said that they were in so much ecstasy, they didn't even take their lunch. They were so eager to see the Lord's dancing. They thought, finally, this is going to happen. And so many people showed up to the house, to the door of Mahaprabhu. It said that the crowd was so dense that if you threw a mustard seed in the air, it had no space to fall back down to earth. That's how many people showed up. And so Mahaprabhu was ready. Everyone was eager. Everyone was ecstatic. You can just imagine. And Mahaprabhu said, Advaita, you dance in one group and you have all these musicians with you. And then Haridas, you dance and I'll give you all these musicians. Srivas, you'll have one group and you dance. And then he looked at Nityananda, and Nityananda, immediately he said, I will not go anywhere. I will always remain by your side. I have no power to dance independently. So Mahaprabhu was very pleased by this. And so the last group was Nityananda, Chaitanya, and Gadadhar. So you can just imagine which group you would want to be a part of. Advaita, Haridas, Srivas, or Gaur Nitai. And so Mahaprabhu began his kirtan in the vicinity of Navadvip. Gradually, it will spread all over the world. It began from the house of Srivas, then to the residents of Navadvip, then into the streets, and now it's all over the world by the influence of Srila Prabhupada. And so the kirtan going to the Qazi's house is described that it was inconceivable, the beauty. Mahaprabhu, his arms, when he put them in the air, there were like 2 golden pillars that stretched to the sky. He had his dhoti tucked in 3 places. He had jasmine flowers in his hair. He had beautiful sandalwood pulp and colorful dots on his head. Garland that stretched down to his knees. And although the crowd was so dense, still everyone was able to fix their eyes on the lotus face of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so they went to the Qazi's house. Everyone was screaming, kill the Qazi, kill the Qazi, kill the Qazi. All their fear was removed. The Qazi, At first he heard the kirtan and he thought, this can't be. Nobody can dare disobey my instruction. So he sent his ministers outside to see what's happening. They went outside and they told him, you won't believe this. You got to get out of here. He went outside and looked, and sure enough, he was too afraid to go outside. Everyone was fearless and ready to burn his whole house down. They destroyed his garden. He had mango trees and all kinds of fruits and flowers. They just destroyed the whole place. So Mahaprabhu in this way began the chanting and dancing, his main activities of Krishna consciousness that we are engaged in. And Prabhupada said, chant, dance, and when you're tired, take prasad. So nobody has a problem with taking prasad, that's for sure. And that was Mahaprabhu's one of his main activities. We know he was invited to so many persons' houses. He would take lunch at a different devotee's house. Everyone was so eager. Sometimes you had to wait months before the Lord can come to your house because there was such a lineup of people wanting to invite him. When he took prasad at the house of Advaita, the description is so elaborate of all the preparation that Advaita Acharya and his wife, Sita Devi, prepared. And Mahaprabhu said, who has prepared this? I take the feet of whoever made such an offering to the Lord. I put those on my head, birth after birth. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya also, he invited the Lord to his house. There was the bags of Raghava or Jali. They were cooked by Damayanti, his sister. They were also extraordinary. And then there was the cooking of Sachi Devi. She cooked with such love. In one instance, she cooked 20 different varieties of spinach shak for the Lord, which was his favorite preparation. It's described that there was 4 places where Mahaprabhu always stayed. Whenever there was kirtan in the house of Srivas, whenever Nityananda Prabhu danced, whenever Raghava Pandit cooked, and whenever Mother Sachi made an offering in her temple. And so taking prasad is very significant. It's actually also very significant that the Lord remained in Jagannath Puri for 18 years of his life. The Chaitanya Bhagavat describes that under the pretext of accepting palatable food, Lord Jagannath actually resides in Nilachala simply to distribute his remnants to the devotees. Lord Jagannath actually descended just to distribute his prasad to everyone. There is this pastime, the history of how Narada Muni, he was traveling. He went to the spiritual world and he served Mother Lakshmi very nicely. So Mother Lakshmi, she asked him, Narada, please take a benediction. So he said, okay, I'll ask for benediction, but you have to make sure whatever I ask, you have to give it to me. She said, yeah, please. He said, give me the prasad, the remnants of Lord Narayan. Lakshmi said, oh, I cannot do this. Narayan told me specifically not to give anyone this prasad. She said, but you promised you have to live up to your word. So she said, okay, I'll try. So she went to Narayan. Somehow or other, she got some prasad. Narayan told her, okay, you can take it this one time. So Narada Muni took the prasad that he got, and he was in so much ecstasy, he started dancing everywhere, all over the universe. And then he happened to pass by Kailash, where Lord Shiva was. Lord Shiva said, Narada, why are you in so much ecstasy? I've never seen you like this. Mahadev, he said, sorry, Narada, he said, I got some remnants from the Lord. Can you believe it? He said, well, do you have any for me? Narada said, sorry, I took it all. Mahadev said, well, let me see your fingers. Maybe there's something stuck in there. So Narada looked, he said, yes, there's something in there. How fortunate you are. So Mahadev took it, and Mahadev also began to dance in so much ecstasy. He began to dance so wildly that people thought the whole universe was going to be destroyed. So Parvati showed up. The Mahadev, calm down. It looks like you're about to destroy the whole universe. What's happening here? It's not the time for annihilation yet. So he said, you can't believe it. I got some prasad from Narayan. He said, well, you have any for me? He said, sorry, I just had one last crumb. So she became so angry. She also was going to destroy the whole universe. So all the demigods, they thought, we got to do something about this. So they went to Narayan in the spiritual world. They told him, you got to come. Parvati is going to destroy the whole place. So Narayan came from the spiritual world. He said, calm down, Parvati, I'll give you some prasad. And she said, thank you very much, but I will not be satisfied if you just give it to me. You have to give it to all of my children. Everyone in the universe also needs to get some prasad. So Narayan told her, okay, I will descend. I will arrive in Jagannath Puri and I will stay there. And all the food that's offered to me first will come to you, which now in Jagannath Puri, there's Bimala there. And all the prasad goes to her, and then everything is distributed from Bimala to everyone. And so this is the history, how the prasad of the Lord is available everywhere, and therefore Mahaprabhu stayed there, which is a significant, an important aspect of his movement to distribute prasad to the whole world. Interestingly enough, also, Lord Jagannath decided to appear in this ISKCON movement. We know the beautiful pastime of how Jagannath first appeared in the West. There was Shyamasundara and Malati. Malati, she went to this trinket shop. It was called Cost Plus. So she went there. She used to like these Mexican jackets. So she went in there looking at these jackets, and then she thought, I don't even like this stuff anymore. She had acquired a higher taste. So she thought, what am I even doing in this shop? So she was about to exit, and she saw right by the cash register, there was all these little figurines, very colorful. She picked one up, and she looked at the bottom, and it said, made in India. So she thought, oh, the Swami's from India. Maybe he'll like this. So she slipped it in her pocket, and she left. She stole it. So she went and she gave it to Prabhupada. I think Shyamasundara gave it. She gave it to Shyamasundara. Shyamasundara gave it to Prabhupada. And as soon as he dropped it on Prabhupada's desk, Lord Jagannath dropped the Lord, just forgive me, dropped the Supreme Lord on Jagannath on Prabhupada's desk. Prabhupada hit the floor, paying obeisances, and he told Mukunda and Shyamasundara, get down, get down. So they both got down, and Prabhupada began to pray, Jagannatha Swami, Nayana Patagami, Bhavatume, over and over again. Then he got up and he called Malati. He said, oh, call her here immediately. So when she came in, she thought, oh, I'm busted. They're gonna know I stole the little figurine. But actually, Prabhupada was very happy. He wanted to know where she got it from, where she got him from. And so Prabhupada said, is there any more? She said, yeah, there's a whole barrel of them. Prabhupada said, no, is there two others? She said, yes, there's some other colorful ones. He said, go and get them. That is Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. And so in this way, Lord Jagannath, he appeared in this ISKCON movement, which is a branch of the Chaitanya tree, to distribute his prasad everywhere. And so we are famous even now. We meet people on the street every day, and they remember our food. Even from 30 years ago, they had some remnants of the Lord. They still remember. So the point is, Mahaprabhu's whole movement is joyfully performed. Chanting, dancing, taking prasad gives the higher taste. By that higher taste, we're able to do the impossible. What is the impossible? Giving up sense gratification. There was, when the first devotees of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, they went to London before Prabhupada, there was one English gentleman who met them, and he asked them, can you make me a Brahmana? And they said, yes, no problem. You just follow these principles. No meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, no gambling. And what was this man's reply? Impossible. He said, this is my whole life. If I give this up, what am I going to do? Prabhupada also one time, he was asked, can you perform any miracles? And he said, yes. You see all these disciples of mine, they don't have illicit sex, they don't gamble, they don't take intoxication, and they don't eat meat. This is my mystic power. I'm able to get all these persons addicted to these sinful activities to give it all up. So we're able to do this by the superior power of the Lord. To control the senses in today's day and age, nobody does such a thing, actually. The people's conception of sense control is very trivial. Their conception of sense control is to have 2 beers instead of 12, or to have like a chicken salad instead of a burger. I'm controlling my senses. Can you see? This is my sense control. I met a guy the other week, and unfortunately he was doing drugs. He was taking prescription pills, and they were so expensive on the black market. He paid $2,000 for about 100 pills. So I told him, you know, intoxication is the quickest way to ruin your human form of life. You're okay now, just do drugs for a year and see how your whole life will be ruined, never to be returned to you. So he said, no, actually, you know, I can control myself. I said, really? He said, yeah, I only take 6 pills at a time. So this is the idea of sense control. It's not don't do any drugs. It's just do some, but limit the dosage. There was Prabhupada, he was speaking to this. It's in this book called Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. He was speaking to a gentleman, Bob Cohen was his name. So Prabhupada told him, you need to become purified. And Bob, he said, how do I do that? Prabhupada said, you just chant the holy name and follow these regulative principles. He said, oh, I follow some of the regulative principles. He said, Prabhupada said, some, there's only 4. Some means 2 or 3. Bob said, yeah, 2 or 3. And Prabhupada said, oh, well, why not the last one? And then Bob said, oh, I mean 1 or 2. And Prabhupada said, okay, well, why not the other 3? And he said, well, I'm vegetarian, but I eat eggs. And Prabhupada said, well, that's also not complete, meaning you're not actually following any of them. And he said, well, vegetarian, I thought I'm making some progress here. And Prabhupada said, actually, vegetarian is no qualification. He said, even the pigeons and the monkeys are vegetarian. Like often we may meet people and they say, oh, I'm vegetarian. And we think, oh, this is very good. But Prabhupada is like, nah, not good enough. And then finally, at the end of the conversation, Prabhupada, he told them, the only way you'll be able to follow these principles is if you apply this process, chant the holy name and associate with these devotees. Otherwise, impossible. You're not going to do it. So somehow or other, we are given a higher taste. We're able to do what even the yogis cannot do. Mahaprabhu, it's described that if you get even one merciful glance from him, everything else becomes insignificant. There's the famous verse by Prabodhananda Saraswati. Kaivalyam narakayate, tridashapur akasha pushpayate, durdhan tindriya kala sarpapatali pradkata dimstrayate, vishvam purna sukayate, vidhi mahindra distrakitayate. That if you get tam eva goda stuma, if you get yakarunaksha, the last verse of the line, last line of the verse that slips from me. But if you get one merciful glance from the Lord, then the senses, although very powerful, like venomous serpents, they become like venomless serpents, though their teeth taking out. Meaning controlling the senses become very easy. Liberation looks to be hellish. The whole world looks to be joyful. The demigods appear to be like insects, and going to the heavenly planets seems to be an imagination. So how is it that we can get Mahaprabhu's mercy? Ultimately, Mahaprabhu wants us to share Krishna consciousness with others. That's where the real higher taste comes from. It's described actually by sharing the message of the Lord with everyone, that the Lord will always be with you. So there's the pastime we know of the Kurma Brahmana who met Mahaprabhu, and he told the Lord, I'm going with you. I'm giving up my household life. I just want to be with you. Mahaprabhu said, don't speak like that again. Just stay where you are, and whoever you meet, wherever you go, instruct them about the science of Krishna. And in this way, I will always be with you. So, yes, we are, you can say, in the association of the Lord. Mahaprabhu's pastimes of Sankirtan are continuing even now by the mercy of Prabhupada in this Krishna consciousness movement. And nonetheless, you can say we have to be vigilant. So we have a very great gift of being able to do the impossible, but any discrepancy can very easily make us fall back again into materialistic life. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there is the pastime of Kala Krishna Das, who was in the association of Mahaprabhu, but he was allured. Actually, he was traveling. He was the personal assistant of Mahaprabhu, and he became allured by the Bhattataris. They were a gypsy nomadic community. They were actually sannyasis. They dressed like sannyasis, but their whole business is cheating, stealing, and alluring persons. So although Kala Krishna Das was with Mahaprabhu, he left early in the morning and he went to join this community. Mahaprabhu immediately went after him, and he told these Bhattataris, bring me back my servant immediately. I'm in the renounced order, you're also in the renounced order. Why are you giving me distress like this? They all went to attack Mahaprabhu, threw their weapons at him. And by Mahaprabhu's supreme potency, Parasya Shaktir, all the weapons of the sannyasis, they fell from their hands, they turned around and chopped up their own bodies. And while this whole commotion was happening, Mahaprabhu dragged Kala Krishna Das by the hair and took him back. He continued his tour with Krishna Das, but then finally when he returned to Jagannath Puri, he called him over and he said he cannot stay with me anymore. And so this pastime is there, Prabhupada, in those purport to describe that one can be in the personal association of the Lord. Still, if one is not careful, one will fall down again to the influence of Maya. So this is the good fortune that we have, that we are able to do the impossible by employing a higher taste in Krishna consciousness. So thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to speak for my purification. If there's any comments or questions now, we can take.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Beautiful class of this text. Such an exclusive explanation how this text goes on with so many examples, beginning with mostly with the Mahaprabhu's pastime, to make us understand what is the lower taste and the higher taste. When we are all in the lower taste, we are captured by the sense gratification. But once we get the higher taste, the lower taste goes automatically low. And slowly that goes up and becomes a person of higher taste. And that the lower taste potency goes down. And you feel the difference. And you explained in so many examples and pastimes of Mahaprabhu that higher taste is more will arrive only when you do the chanting.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, there is one question by Jade. Can you see that, or I can read out it?
Yes, I can see. So Jade asks a question. What are some ways we can perceive the way Krishna is taking steps towards us? Krishna is always taking steps towards us. In other words, you're saying, how can we understand that we are making advancement in Krishna consciousness? So advancement is judged by, the Bhagavatam says, Bhakti Pareshanu Bhavo Viraktri Anrachachuka Eka Kala. That there's three things that we can perceive while we are making advancement. They are detachment from the material world. They are experiencing Krishna's presence in our own life and feeling some satisfaction in the heart. So these three are compared to the experiences one gets while eating. While eating, we feel relief from hunger. Then we feel some nourishment for the body, and we feel some satisfaction. So the more that we feel Krishna present in our life, these things will occur. We no longer have a taste for material sense gratification. We can see how he's always present, particularly when we chant his holy name. It becomes not a mechanical thing, but an interaction, a connection with Krishna. We can feel that he's there. And we feel satisfied. We feel happy. One time Prabhupada was asked, how can I tell if Krishna is pleased with me? And Prabhupada's reply was that if Krishna is pleased with you, you will also be pleased, because we are part and parcel of him. So Krishna is always taking steps towards us. The first step that Krishna takes towards us is that he sends a spiritual master. Brahmanda Brahmate Koni Bhagavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Bhai Bhakti Lata Bij. We're wandering up and down throughout this universe, from this planet to that planet, from this species of life to that. But finally, for one who is sincere, who has a desire to know who am I, why am I here, and sincerely wants to love God, then Krishna understands that sincerity from within the heart, and he sends a devotee. So the first step that Krishna takes is he sends a devotee, whether we meet the devotee on the street, whether we find a book somewhere and begin to read it. Krishna works in mysterious ways. As the Bible says, God moves in mysterious ways. And so this is the first indication that Krishna is taking a step towards us. He puts us in the association of the devotees. And then after that, he wants to see how many steps that are we taking towards him. If we take one step towards him, he takes 10 or more. So throughout our Krishna consciousness, if we are a little introspective, a little conscious, we can see that in so many ways Krishna is taking steps towards us. Just that fact that we have devotional service, it's a sign that Krishna is looking after us. To be able to have devotional service available to us is not a cheap thing. So hearing is important. Krishna is always available to us just by opening the book. That's Krishna taking a step towards us. It's described that Krishna manifests himself in the Vedic literatures because living entities are not able to get out of this world on their own. So in so many ways, he's making himself available. But as Prabhupada says, the problem is that Krishna is so eager to have us come back to Godhead, but we don't want to go there. So I guess the answer to your question is that Krishna is always taking steps towards us. It's just that the more that we become in tune, conscious, purified, the more our desire is greater to want to know him, the more that we're able to perceive these steps that he's taking towards us. I hope that helps in some way. Anything else? Okay.
Krishna Prabhu.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Pranam. Thank you so much for your wonderful class and your basically the expositions from Chaitanya Charitamrita and other literatures. It was so engrossing. So Prabhu, I just had a question in this regard. So you may, I think in many places in the Bhagavatam, and you also mentioned like the non-devotees or impersonalists or persons who are not aware of Krishna, I put so much effort, but because I have not surrendered to the lotus feet of Krishna, so there's no way I can make progress, like whatever other so-called efforts and austerities I might undergo. You mentioned that. So similarly, the Christians, they say there's no way to the Father except through me. Lord Jesus Christ has said that. And similarly, the other religions like Islam, they will say there's no way to the Lord except going through Muhammad. So how does that, how do we say that this is not sectarian? We're saying there's no way other than surrendering to the lotus feet of Krishna. And in the other religion, they say there's no way but other than surrendering to the lotus feet.
Well, here it's not saying that there's no other way other than Gaudiya Vaishnavism. It's just saying that there's no other way other than bhakti. So Srila Prabhupada has explained that bhakti can be found in all traditions. The Lord is not a monopoly of one tradition, but in all different cultures and religions, you'll find some people who sincerely want to know and love God, and some who are just materialistic. They are just believers, but they actually have not genuine love for the Lord. So Krishna is a supreme name of the Lord, but he is available in all traditions. God is in everyone's heart. And when he understands the sincerity of the individual, then he can reveal himself. Of course, it may take a bit more knowledge for other traditions to actually come to the standard. But we have our distinction because of the fact that the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedic literatures have the greatest knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When other traditions are trying to love God, okay, in the Christian tradition, they have at least some kind of personal conception of the Lord. And so there can be some bhakti there, because there is the servant, there's the bhakta, Bhagavan, and bhakti. But the problem is the bhakti can't be developed to a great extent because they don't know how the Lord looks, where he is, what he does. And so they may have some bhakti, but it's not very great. It's actually very tiny. But gradually, Krishna may choose to reveal himself to them. I know so many devotees that before they came to Krishna consciousness, they were praying fervently, God, if you exist, I want to know who you are. Please reveal yourself to me. And so then the Bhagavad Gita shows up. And similarly, there's other persons in other religions who do like that. They pray very sincerely to God, please reveal yourself to me. But then he may send them the Bible. So he's reciprocating with where they are at, because he knows their desire he knows our desire better than we do. So they may not be ready to know the Supreme Lord directly in his supreme form, but they have some inclination to want to do bhakti. So Krishna sends them some way that they can do that. And then gradually, hopefully, sooner than later, they can ultimately come to know Krishna in his original form, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So the only way is bhakti, devotion to God. It's by coming to a higher power. The yogis and the gyanis, they employ their own power, and therefore they always fail. Even if they come to the impersonal conception, to Brahman, as that verse says, they fall down again, patantyada, to the material world. They may fall down to mode of goodness activities, philanthropic, altruistic work, but nonetheless they fall down. And so the devotee, they tune into a higher power. There's many persons also who are addicted to drugs, and then they go to Alcoholic Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. And in these groups, a lot of them, they tell them, actually in this 12-step program, that you're not going to be able to give up this addiction unless you tune into a higher power. So indirectly, they become directed to a spiritual process to get free from these lower influences of nature. So I know a few devotees also, they began, at least one devotee I know, who began his journey from going to these meetings because he realized, I need to tune into a higher power. Only God can help me with this addiction that I have. And so by that, gradually they became inclined to hear about spiritual topics. So this is what I can offer for your question, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhu. That clarified it. Thank you so much.
Okay, maybe we should stop here. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubheva
His Grace Vrindavan Madhurya Prabhu ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, Hare Krishna, Asamvaldi, Hare Krishna.